give another minute or two here for the rest of the folks that are in the process of signing in to join. So just stand by for a minute. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So today's RapidScale webinar is based on our professional services team and why we think we're pretty good at doing those services. My name is Dwayne Barnes. I run the engineering team here at RapidScale. And I just want to let everyone know that this session will be recorded. We'll have that posted on our partner portal by tomorrow morning. And if you don't have access to that portal, feel free to reach out to our wonderful marketing team here, marketing@rapidscale.net, and they'll give you portal access. And anytime throughout the presentation, there is a Q&A section in the GoToMeeting on the right. You can pose those questions, and the moderators in the office here will do their best at answering them. And we'll have plenty of time at the end of this session for Q&A as well. So anything that can't be answered over the Q&A chat session there, the moderators will pose those questions to me, and I'll do my best to answer them. Today's presentation will likely only last about 30 to 35 minutes. So just letting everybody know kind of to help manage the time. So, market statistics. I think everybody on the call probably knows that the biggest barrier to entry to pretty much any service is getting from point A to point B, right? And that's sort of been the biggest barrier since day one when cloud computing became kind of a standard service offering. So about 80% of IT decision makers feel like their leadership underestimates the costs and efforts of managing cloud systems internally. And another 50% believe that they're not prepared to address the challenges of managing their own resources over the next 5 years. And then, as we all know in the industry, it's extremely difficult to find talented people. A lot of enterprise IT folks, will start in kind of the SMB space, move into the enterprise, and then they move on to the service providers as kind of a career path, and that really leaves a gap in that mid-market business to find talented individuals for managing that infrastructure. So, a couple of things here. A lot of cloud service providers, especially the hyperscalers, have no managed services or no professional services teams. So really, one of the niche offerings in the channel is a lot of the channel-based cloud providers do have managed service offerings and do have professional services teams. How RapidScale is different is we actually don't outsource or subcontract those services to anybody. And from a professional services standpoint, that makes a huge difference in the success of a migration from a customer premise or another cloud provider to the RapidScale platform. Oftentimes, you work with the bigger, household name providers, and what they're doing is they're calling up a local VAR or even a national VAR and using their PS bench to send people out in the field and do those migrations. They don't do them in-house, and that becomes a project management nightmare, trying to coordinate multiple vendors and people that may not even be employees of those VARs. They're 1099s, and there's just no motivation to get the things done that need to be done. Plus, when you outsource or subcontract professional services staff, they're not necessarily familiar with the platform that they're migrating to or from. So we really feel like using our own in-house cloud engineers to do those migrations solves all of those problems. Number one, they're very familiar with our platform. We're also, they're the same engineers that actually have to support the environment when they get back, to the office, so to speak, right? So we don't always send them out on site to do the migrations. On occasion, we do for the larger opportunities and the larger implementations. More times than not, they can do most of that work remotely. So, and then of course the handoff from the professional services team to the actual support teams that will be taking those calls 24/7 is much cleaner when they're sitting in the same office together. So the value. This is probably anyone on the call that's been in a sales role for a long time. You've always are taught to sell the value of services instead of selling on price or trying to discount things that aren't necessarily commissionable. Many people feel like waiving those fees is the easiest way to get the customer to sign. From my experience, and I've trained thousands of salespeople over the years, and I've been in the cloud space for 19 years now. That just doesn't work. You really have to motivate people to get the project done. And we see our competitors out there in the field, spending 6, 7, 8, 9 months to get customers migrated because there's simply no financial motivation to get them migrated because they waived those fees. The other thing that happens when you waive a fee to the customer, it devalues the service, right? On the earlier slide, we mentioned that, IT folks feel like the executives, underestimate the value and the complexity of managing cloud infrastructure. And when you waive a professional services fee, that devalues it to the customer as well. They figure, well, it must not be that hard to move it if you're going to give it to me for free. So the other thing to note here is RapidScale, we complete most of those migrations within 60 days. So that's good for everybody, right? That gets them in the billing. That makes sure we can pay our partners their commissions as quickly as possible. That gets the customer out of their existing problem situation, wherever they're at, and gets them up and running as quickly as possible. And we put a lot of effort into those migrations, and it starts by the pre-sales team here at RapidScale writing very detailed statements of work. And those statements of work are oftentimes written, with the customer, in the same office, kind of going through all of their infrastructure, their architecture, their licensing, all of the pain points, and we document all of that and have them actually, co-sign that with us. And that way, when it goes into the engineering team's hands, they have a very detailed, run book, so to speak, of what they need to do to get that customer migrated. The other thing is on the larger ones, we actually have to send people on site, and so we actually put a cost breakdown in that statement of work. And that really helps with selling the value. So we estimate the number of hours per server, per work group, per workload, per application, per location. A lot of customers are multi-site and have IT workloads across multiple locations. And when you break it down into that level of detail, it's much easier for the customer to look at that and say, okay, these are hard costs. Software licensing that we use to enable replication, travel and expense costs, just sheer time to perform these migrations. And it's a lot easier than just saying, hey, Mr. Customer, we're going to charge you 50 grand to move all that stuff. And the customer immediately thinks that's either too expensive or, they're going to try to do it themselves and take a year, which is not good for any of us. So when we break it down and explain in great detail what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what the costs are, it's super easy to show the value there. So one of the very important things to perform a migration is to actually have a migration methodology. Any company that has a professional services team, and they're doing migrations and work one-time fees and stuff like that on a regular basis, they really should have a migration methodology. And so at RapidScale, we use the phased approach just like you would expect. You can't just show up and copy everything and move it in one fell swoop. It generally doesn't work that way. So it starts with preparation. As with anything, when you have a plan for success, it's very difficult to be successful without preparing. So we gather all the data, all the documentation of the existing infrastructure, and just have a very in-depth conversation with the customer about their goals and pain points and anything that wasn't in that documentation that we need to be aware of. From there, we actually go back and provision all the resources that's required to support that migration. So we get all the Windows servers and database servers and mail servers and everything that needs to be provisioned on the target side of that migration to get that up and running so that we have a place to land all that data. From there, we actually start the data replication process. Generally speaking, that's 3 to 4, sometimes 5 different technologies that we use to replicate data. Everything from Active Directory replication, the database replication, Exchange server, mailbox migrations. We get all of that replicated to the target side, and that's really just the initial seed of that data, so to speak. It's not going to be the final subset of the information. That's really that first pass, so to speak. From there, we do user acceptance testing. Essentially, we verify the data that's there. We make sure the customer can log into their applications and see that data, interact with it as they would in the production environment, and make sure that all the permissions are set up right, and essentially just everything works as they would expect it to. From there, the fifth phase is the actual migration. This is when we plan the maintenance window to do the final cut of each application, and more times than not, that phase has its own multiple phases underneath it. So we're moving potentially the front end of the environment first, and then we move the back end in a second phase. Maybe we move the mailboxes first, and then we move the application second. So that's usually the longest part of the process here. And then once everything's migrated, we put them in an elevated support queue for the next 2 to 4 weeks. And basically what that does is it lets our help desk know that, hey, this customer was just migrated. There's likely to be small issues cropping up here and there. Maybe a printer wasn't set up properly or wasn't able to be tested properly, and any tickets that come in from that migration really need to be treated with white glove service and as a priority, a higher priority than it would normally be, just because they're fresh off of a migration. And I think the last phase is really one of those things where I haven't seen it in any other providers, proposals or methodologies, over the years, is that optimization phase. This is incredibly important. It's actually very helpful to mention this to customers during the sales process. Is we just don't forklift your data as is and drop it on our infrastructure and send you a bill. Now, other suppliers might do that, but we really feel like that doesn't add any value. That typically just moves problems from point A to point B and doesn't really potentially help the customer with anything other than maybe a lower bill or something like that. But that optimization phase is incredibly important. And so we actually dedicated a whole slide to that here. So that forklift approach just doesn't work. Our approach really is, throughout the entire professional services engagement, we're constantly documenting, areas for success to make sure that when we get them to our platform, it's a far better experience than what they had on their previous platform. And a lot of that comes down to consolidating, making things easier for the customer to use, making the workflows better. And I've just listed a handful of examples here at the bottom. As we do migrations, we often find that, the customer in their on-premise environment is used to just firing up resources like crazy because there's a perceived zero cost at doing that. We just completed a migration a few weeks ago of a customer that had 9 different SQL database instances. And they realized, or we uncovered during that migration, that they were years behind on payments to Microsoft for those licensing. Of course, they didn't know it, but when we evaluated that and said, hey, if we move all 9 of these instances to our environment, this is your SQL license cost alone. It was somewhere in the range of 10 grand a month, just for an even number here for the sake of a example. And of course, they were shocked and didn't know what they were going to do. And we really sat down with them and said, hey, look, we'll move it as is, and then as long as we can consolidate it in that first month, we can reduce that license expense by like 9x. And so we did that. We built a single, always-on cluster of 3 bigger database servers, and we eliminated 6 individual servers along with all the licensing that they had with that as well. So, again, you have to have talented people, very, very, good people at understanding licensing and all of the associated ways to make that better when you do the migration. So, in that particular case, we saved that customer a lot of headache with Microsoft. We often also find that customers have multiple file servers. Maybe they have one in every location, or they have multiple ones because they ran out of disk space on one and didn't know how to expand that. So we find ourselves frequently consolidating that down to a single file server when we move them. Backups is another big thing. A customer over the years, probably had tape backup at some point, and then they moved to disk-to-disk backup, and then they moved to some sort of cloud backup. But all of those are kind of disparate and spread across different infrastructures. And for us, we've been cloud backups from day one, obviously, as a cloud provider. So consolidating all of that into one platform with a very, very simple cost metric associated with that makes a lot of sense. Exchange, of course, we can migrate Exchange servers. That's not a problem, but we also have our own hosted Exchange platform, and we support Office 365 Exchange Online. And so just sitting with the customer and understanding their needs and determining the best path for them to migrate to which one of those solutions makes a lot of sense. Another customer we just did had 6 different Exchange servers in their environment, and we consolidated that down to a simple mailbox fee on our side. Email archives is another big one. We're a Mimecast partner. They're the leader in software as a service-based email archiving and continuity. And they'll also ingest legacy archives. So, again, recent customer had 3 different email archiving solutions over the years and could never find a provider that would consolidate those all down to a single solution. We were able to attack that with Mimecast and get them all migrated into one single pane of glass with all their legacy archives. And of course, RapidScale being very well known for providing virtual desktops, or desktop as a service, or VDI, whatever terminology you're used to hearing it. We've become experts in that, globally managing virtual desktops. So we moved that to our cloud desktop solution. And the key here is, I was recently talking to a IT leader at a customer and simply just asked them one question. Do you have any idea what it costs you per employee to enable them as a new hire with IT resources? Do you know how much you're spending on desktops and licensing and phones and help desk support and so on and so forth? And the customer just looked at me and said, I have no idea. I don't even know if I have a way to get that information. And I said, well, when you finish migrating to us, here's your 4 charges from us for all of those services. And of course, that IT manager was very happy with that output, and sure enough, we were able to do that by the time they migrated to us. So we had a couple of case studies here. I'll talk to them at a high level, and certainly after the case studies, we'll open it up to a live Q&A if anybody has questions or concerns. But we always like to back up some of this stuff with real live solutions here. So the first one was a manufacturing company up in the Northeast. They had about 500 or so desktops with a national MSP. And one of the things that they were complaining to us about in the very first meeting we had with them was all of the support was reactive. They really had no idea what they had. Their bills were, increasingly getting larger and larger every month and quarter. And they just didn't feel like they had any advocate on that supplier side to really work with them on what they needed. The other thing that was occurring for this particular customer was they had a Microsoft Enterprise agreement that was coming due. And that Enterprise agreement was going to cost them, over $100,000 per year for the next 3 years. And they really didn't want to renew that if they didn't have to. So, of course, being experts in that space, we were able to come in, show them a very compelling solution to solve all their problems. Turns out that it was less expensive. Of course, that wasn't our goal to save them money necessarily. Our goal was to go in and give them a better experience, and hopefully not charge them more than they were already spending. But it worked out that we ended up saving them a ton of money, over $200,000 a year. We got them migrated in just about 2 months' time, and they avoided that very large capital expenditure for renewing that Microsoft EA agreement. We also consolidated all of their server infrastructure by 42%, meaning that was where we realized that cost savings is during that optimization phase. We just got rid of all the unnecessary servers that their previous provider just kept billing them for, even though they weren't using them. On top of that, we hand them over to our account management team after they're migrated, and the account management team will do QBRs with them, monthly ticket reviews, and really focus on making sure that they get that white glove service, from now on. The second case study here was a recent win for us, also up in the Northeast in the Boston area. This was a very sizable legal services firm, and this particular company does outsourced e-discovery work for their partner law firm, so to speak. When you hear that, you automatically should think large amounts of data. So this particular customer had about 50 terabytes of data in production, and they were replicating that same amount of data to their DR site. And their pain point was their very expensive Hitachi storage array was coming up on end of life, end of support from the manufacturer. And I'm not sure how many people on the phone know that much about Hitachi, but it's sort of the most expensive storage that you can buy. So very, very expensive stuff. They're probably looking at roughly $1 million capital spend to refresh that equipment. And that's just a very big, chunk of money to spend on something that's still working, but, should it break in a month, they wouldn't be able to get any support on it. So, of course, we come in, sit down with them, understand all their problems. Of course, licensing is an issue, hardware refresh across the board, the CapEx expense for the storage. And really, while they could see that they were replicating data to the disaster recovery site, they'd never tested it and were kind of afraid to really go down that path and test that for them. So, we were able to come in, present them with a compelling solution where we provided them very similar services, but at a consumption-based price that they could scale up and scale down and really not have to worry about over-architecting or under-architecting on an on-premise based hardware solution. And again, we were able to save them, over $1 million in capital, and our monthly recurring fees, even if you total that up over the term, they were still spending far less money to buy those things as a service from RapidScale. And without a professional services team, we wouldn't have won either one of these opportunities. So that's why I want to make sure that everybody on the phone really understands, the value of professional services and that it should be leveraged to help win deals that aren't winnable by other providers out there that don't have those professional services teams. So with that, as promised, wasn't a terribly long presentation. I do want to mention that we're doing these sales and technical trainings every month. So the next sales-focused training will be on March 1st, led by Mark Sikowski, president here at RapidScale. and the next technical one will be led by myself on March 15th, and we'll be sending out reminders and notifications on those as those dates get closer. So I'll ask the moderators if there's any questions that weren't able to be answered on the chat. I'm happy to answer those now if any of those exist.
Hey, Dwayne. Not a ton, but I'd love if you could speak to demo accounts and how those work and getting them set up and all of that fun stuff. Yeah,
sure. So we have a very robust demo POC environment here at RapidScale. It's really focused on our desktop as a service platform, as that's usually the product that everybody wants to kick the tires on. So demo accounts, we give those out all the time. We do set them to expire after 30 days. So generally speaking, customers only need a few days to test them out. So we're happy to do that. Just reach out to your channel manager and they can get you all set up with a demo account for that. We also do proof of concepts for more complicated integration testing for desktop as a service. So if we need to do that as well, we're happy to engage with you and your client.
All right, there's nothing currently, but let's give it a few seconds here and see if anyone in the chat's anything over.
All right.
All right, nothing's coming in, so I guess we could just save people a half hour of their day. Oh, mostly people ask why RapidScale versus AWS, if you want to speak to that at all, Dwayne.
Yeah, sure. Well, so just generally speaking, AWS, Azure, Google, they're considered hyperscalers, right? So they have no managed services teams, no professional services teams. So what I always tell customers and partners, hey, if you've got 20 people in your IT department, you don't really need RapidScale, right? We're not focused on large enterprise, 5,000 employee and up type businesses. They typically have very, very dense IT departments with very specialized folks on their teams. And Amazon and Azure are great for those type of customers. RapidScale is focused on what we consider the mid-market to the upper SMB, and those companies typically have 2 or less IT people on staff, and those companies need help. And for us, that's where we shine, is when we can come in and add value with our managed services, our professional services, and our flexibility to deliver solutions that meet those customers' needs, as opposed to just saying, hey, here's your CPU, memory, and storage, and a web page to set it up yourself, go away. That's really not our business. Our business is consultative sales approach, as well as very detailed managed services and professional services teams.
All right, more are coming in actually. So how do we price our professional services? Is it fixed or T&E?
It's typically not fixed. What we do is during the sales process, we sit down and gather all the data. We can estimate things, but once we write the statement of work, that is very detailed about what's in scope and what's out of scope, and it becomes a fixed fee statement of work from that point forward. But there's really not an average per se. It very much varies from one customer to the next.
All right. What is the upfront professional engagement cost for an initial survey?
Yeah, we don't charge for that. Generally speaking, most customers are already have some sort of virtualization, or they're already in a VMware or Hyper-V environment, and we can guide them to quickly run some reports out of those environments to give it to us for an initial discovery. So there's really no fee associated with that work.
Great. What is the difference between your managed and professional services?
So managed services are basically everything that we offer as a cloud provider. We offer it unmanaged or managed. And the big difference there is, when an end user or administrator needs help, if it's managed, they can call us and we'll sit on the phone with them till whatever that problem is resolved. In an unmanaged scenario, if the infrastructure is up and we can get to it and the customer can get to it, there really isn't anything we're going to be able to do to help them. Managed services comes with monitoring, patching, third-party application escalations, all the things you would expect from a managed service on a particular server or mailbox or Office 365 account or disaster recovery implementation. Professional services are one-time fees, and those, typically are associated with migrations, implementations for more complex environments. So if we offer a disaster recovery service, we call it cloud recovery. For example, a customer will want us to help them kind of design how that works and what the failover groups look like, and help them configure the replication on their end and all that sort of stuff. That there would be a professional services fee associated with that. Exchange migrations are a big one. We use a particular piece of software to do the mailbox migrations, and there's a fixed fee that we actually have to pay that software company to use their technology to do mailbox migrations. And so, of course, we charge a professional services fee to the customer that covers our licensing costs as well as our time to do those migrations. So the big difference is managed services are a recurring fee to manage the infrastructure, and professional services are a one-time fee to do implementations and migrations.
Great. So in a managed environment, what is the response time for a trouble ticket?
So all of our trouble tickets, regardless of the severity, we strive to have a 30-minute response time to our customers. That doesn't mean we're going to resolve whatever the problem is in 30 minutes. That just means we're going to have a live person reach out to the customer and respond to that ticket within 30 minutes. It's really hard to put a response time SLA around problem resolution. Some problems are, 2 seconds to fix. Others might take 2 days, depending on the severity of the issue.
All right, and we have one more right now. This one's more specific. Have you worked with setting up malware in schools?
Yes. So assuming you're talking about anti-malware, antivirus protection. So what I would say is we offer that service on our servers and desktop solutions. We don't offer that on hardware that's just random hardware on premise. So we've got a fair amount of education-focused customers on our cloud desktop solution, and we deploy antivirus, anti-malware for those customers.
All right. Oh, they keep coming in, Dwayne. How do we respond to concerns regarding the size of RapidScale versus Amazon? That's a good one.
Yeah, great question. I would say that for Amazon versus anybody, right? They're the 800-pound gorilla for sure. There's a lot of different ways to handle that. We've recently gone through a lot of due diligence from larger customers that have, asked those same questions. So from a RapidScale perspective, we're cash flow positive, we're financially stable, we're growing double digits every year. And no independently owned cloud provider is going to come anywhere close to a publicly traded company the size of Amazon. So, and again, we don't really compete with Amazon from the perspective of it's just a completely different target customer. So, I haven't gone through any due diligence with a customer that was comparing us with Amazon. More times than not, they're comparing us to like a Rackspace or a Navisite. And their financials are obviously public. Although Rackspace just recently went private, the financials are still pretty easy to get on those bigger companies. What I would tell you is that most of the bigger companies are not cash flow positive. They're burning cash quarter over quarter, and they're very much looking at recapitalization events. So, we're very happy to show audited financials to a customer under NDA. And so far, we haven't lost any opportunities when getting that deep into due diligence. So hopefully that answers the question.
All right, I'll give it a few more seconds. I think that's it for questions, Dwayne.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Very happy that you guys made it today. And again, we'll be posting this webinar on our partner portal. And of course, hope you can join us on the next one. Have a good day, everyone.